have done. And thirdly, also to have a comprehensive toolkit and policy design and implementation strategy, very similar to conventional finance. And we complement, we don't just rely on macroprudential policies, but we complement it like with fiscal policy, tax policies, and then microprudential policies. So all these are complementary to the macroprudential. And our policies are also very targeted. Targeted because we want to reduce unintended consequences on other sectors. For example, if it's applied to the property sector, to prevent formation of asset bubbles and so on. So we have very targeted so that it doesn't have unintended consequences or spillovers to other sectors and then cause an over-adjustment. So it's, in this case, discretionary rather than rule-based. And we also do it progressively so that, and incrementally, so to prevent an over-correction. And it's simple rather than complex so that it can be, it's enforceable. And then we also have in place the governance arrangements. And then the final thing, which everyone has commented about, is the communication aspects, because to provide clarity, to make it sure that it's consistent and coordinated and continuous, not just at the point that we introduce it, but continuous, so that there's an understanding, and this is to prevent an overreaction to such measures.
Okay. Governor Choueiri, Morocco, what is your view on the potential role of macroprudential policies following Governor Zeti, not only for Islamic banking, but in general in your country? Do you have any experience that you want to share with us about your what happened in Morocco, measures that you may have to employ or that you have considered employing on the macroprudential side as a complement to microprudential policies?
والله احنا قانونيا كيف ذكرت الدكتور زيتي، احنا خضعنا في القانون البنكي نفسه على انه خضعنا البنوك الاسلاميه لنفس الاطار موحد مع البنوك التقليديه، سواء في المراقبه الماكرو احترازيه، اداره الازمات الماليه، او كذلك معالجه الصعوبات. طبيعه الحال خلينا خط الرجعه. خط الرجعه معناه على انه غادي نمشيو تدريجيا، ثم على انه غادي ناخذوا في كل خطوات الخصوصيات ديال البنوك الاسلاميه. معنى هذا على انه خلينا الوقت الكافي باش يمكن بالنسبه للادوات الاليات لتتبع هاد المخاطر، خلينا واحد حتى بالنسبه لنا واحد الوقت ديال التكيف اللي غادي يسهل علينا الماموريه. بطبيعه الحال التجارب ديال الدول اللي سبقتنا في هذا الميدان كذلك غادي ناخذوها بعين الاعتبار فيما يخص الآليات أو الأدوات التي سنجعلها تختص بالنسبة للبنوك الإسلامية.
Thank you very much. That was very clear. Yeah. Let me turn to Mr. Ahmed.
Yes, thank you very much. I think what we see is that amongst our members in the IFSB, the governors have the same clear understanding of what the issues are, what the risks are. But the jurisdictions are, most of them, applying a wide range of macroprudential tools to curb excessive reliance on real estate, which is a feature of Islamic finance, but which is also a feature of a more broader class of economies. And it has also to be borne in mind that the massive growth of Islamic finance, to which Her Excellency the Managing Director referred to, is on the back of very strong domestic growth, which is having an impact on a number of dimensions. So what the real difference that we see is not in the application of macroprudential tools. Most of our countries are using LTV, DTI. They're using measures to restrict exposure to specific sectors. The difference that we see is that in one group of countries, the macroprudential framework has been institutionalized. It's a financial stability framework. There are, as Governor Zeti has said, there are coordination mechanisms in place. There's surveillance in place. The other countries on the whole, although they're very aware, are in the process of instituting these institutional mechanisms. They haven't yet reached the stage where you can say that there is a closely integrated group of institutions, that there's an oversight committee. So I think that's really where we are, that Islamic finance does have vulnerabilities at the macroprudential side, especially to certain sectors, real estate sector, but the way that this is being addressed is quite common across our countries. Some instruments are more prevalent than other instruments, but again, there's a very, very good understanding of the risks, and I think we can expect, certainly in the MENA region, to see very strong movement in terms of the institutional development of this framework.
Thank you. Mr. Hamad.
Yes.
Macro-Pro in Bahrain.
Thank you.
What do we have to tell us?
Yes. Well, the macroprudential policy for Islamic banks is not any different that applied for conventional finance, as Her Excellency Dr. Zeti mentioned. But there are fine-tuning and adjustment that needs to be done to suit the specifications and features of Islamic finance. We spoke earlier about the definition of deposits and deposit protection. And also there are issues about capital adequacy when it comes to the calculation of capital adequacy to cater for the specific nature of Islamic finance, which is the dealing between investment account holders and banks is based on profit and loss sharing. So there is a need for adjustment in certain tools for macroprudential policies. But for me, and also let me also add that stress testing is an important aspect of the macroprudential, which we have to do regularly at central banks. And when we do stress testing for Islamic finance, we need to adjust and add certain factors, which is like concentrations in real estate, concentrations in commodities. That's an important aspect in the stress testing for Islamic finance. Another issue which probably we didn't talk about is the consistency in accounting treatment. Across, if you view, for example, have a view of what is being applied across the globe, you will see different standards. Although we have an international standards issued by IOFI, why don't we test that standards and apply it, so that then we'll have a consistent way of accounting for transactions? If we don't, then how would you be able to measure risk in a better way? How would you be able to implement the capital adequacy? There is a strong link between the accountancy issue and the regulatory issue. But I know I have a concluding remark on this issue, which is related to what happened in the financial crisis. And again, this is related to being prudent as a regulator, as an industry, and so on. What we've seen in the past, say, 10 years is a strong wave of regulatory reforms that not only put the industry at severe pressure, but also the regulators as well. And we've seen recently by a statement by major central bank governors saying that we need to take a few steps back because what we've done is counterproductive. Well, a lot of people were saying this a long time ago. You cannot hammer the industry with strong regulations or tough regulations when the economy is sick. The economy is still sick, and we continue to hammer the industry with regulations. The banking is the bone of the economy. If the banks cannot lend money at a good rates, in a good, to a good sectors, the economy will not grow. So instead of hammering the industry with all these regulations, we need to make the environment eligible. We need to emphasize on a concept which economists has been preaching on for long years and nobody listening to them, and that is the concept of sustainable growth, not greedy growth. Greedy growth is what brought us to this problem, and we are still suffering. So I think we need to rethinking of this regulatory reforms, sustainable growth issues, so that we will be able to take the economy forward. We are now taking the economy backward. Thank you.
That's an interesting remark coming from a supervisor.
That's my personal point of view.
From a very tough supervisor.
I know, but this is an interesting remark, because this is the remark that I'm not. I will say what I think in a second, but this is what I normally hear from people in the industry who are very dissatisfied with regulation, and normally the official sector tends to say, well, but after what happened, it's very important that we enhance the safety of the industry by enhancing the strength of regulation. I think the point that you're making, with which I agree, is that one needs to find a balance. Yes. Needs to find a balance between making the system safer on the one hand, and still making sure that the system has the capacity to finance sustained growth, while this being consistent with stability. And striking these two goals is not easy at all. Another thing that I would say, and this is also a personal comment, I think that's something that we have disregarded in this regulatory reform process, is that it is not only regulation that matters, it is supervision. And you need both in a appropriate balance. And when you don't pay much attention to supervision, then you may overshoot on regulation. But at the end of the day, the quality of regulation is only as good as the quality of the supervision that goes associated with it. So I think that maybe a little bit more proportionality between regulation and supervision would have been warranted. And, but I think that there are a number of areas where there is still time to see whether the regulations that have put in place are the optimal ones, or whether some recalibration is needed. There is now some thinking about de-risking, for example, which is very important. Are some of the standards internationally, or the perceptions of these standards, contributing to an excessive de-risking, which is leading to impairment of correspondent banking, remittances, and so on? Do we have to recalibrate some aspects of regulation? But I think it's very important to recalibrate aspects, to close the regulatory reform agenda so that we provide certainty to the industry, but at the same time that we avoid what in some country may be politically intentioned attempts to unwind regulation. And I will be very clear with one example: the attempts in the United States by some parties to unwind Dodd-Frank, which has been the main body of regulation, or also some attempts that have been made at the global level. So recalibrate, yes, readjust, yes, but let's not forget that we had a financial tsunami, a financial meltdown, and then we had a regulatory revolution as a result, which I think one can understand. Let me just now turn to the audience. We have a few minutes for questions, and I would hope that some of you have things to ask. Please, over here. There are mics There is somebody, a gentleman here who would like to ask a question. If you can bring the mic to him. Thank you very much. And if the mic functions, so much the better.
To develop the Islamic sector.
Could you raise your voice a little bit more, sir?
You need to develop the evaluation system, a standard, international standard. Now, rating for the regular bank is important, so they get the finance at a better rate. So what is now the development of? Is there a rating system based on conventional banking, or is it on Sharia? And if it's on Sharia, also there is sex in Islam. So what is the position now of evaluating the Islamic banking properly?
Okay, thank you very much. Let's, in the interest of time, let's collect a couple more questions right behind the gentleman, and then I will turn to the panel so that they can offer their comments. If anybody else has a question, now is your time to raise your hand so that we can turn to you in a minute. Please.
محمد حج العنزي، محامي سعودي وعضو الرابطة العربية للثقافة والفكر والأدب في دبي. معد برامج في وزارة الإعلام تلفزيون الكويت.
Sorry, could you just wait until some of the people put the headphones, please?
محمد حج العنزي، محامي سعودي وعضو الرابطة العربية للثقافة والفكر والأدب في دبي. معد برامج ثقافية ودينية في تلفزيون الكويت وزارة الإعلام. حقيقة حسب ما سمعت من الحاضرين اليوم أن ليس هناك مشكلة في التشريع وفي المشرعين وفي التشريع لقانون التمويل الإسلامي، ولكن الكرة وهي في، وكذلك ليس الكرة هي في المؤهلين والإدارات للبنوك التمويل. نعم، حصة التمويل الإسلامي هي بالنسبة للأصول العالمية هي قليلة وصغيرة، ولكن حاجة النظام العالمي الإسلامي ويعطي أهمية خاصة للتمويل الإسلامي. فأعتقد المشكلة هي في توعية البنوك العالمية للنظام الإسلامي، وكذلك أعتقد المشكلة هي في الإدارات. ولكن كما قال يعني عبد اللطيف الجوهري من المغرب أن هناك بالنسبة للتشريع حسموا هذا الأمر، هناك مجلس أعلى للعلماء وهناك لجنة منبثقة تسن هذه القوانين وتشرعها ثم تطبقها الآليات لكل بنك. ف يعني هذا أمر مهم. بالنسبة للسؤال، عندي سؤال للأستاذ عبد اللطيف الجواهري. بالنسبة للتقييم، ألا ترى وضع لجنة عالمية إسلامية للتقييم، طبعا مرتبطة بالمنظمة الإسلامية العالمية للدول العربية والإسلامية، أن تقيم وضع البنوك الإسلامية من الناحية التشريعية والإدارية وتقييم مستوى العاملين بهذه البنوك من الناحية العلمية الشرعية. بالنسبة للأستاذ عزيز، قصة التواصل، يعني أعتقد بالنسبة للتعريف ما هو قصة، يعني أعتقد قصة التواصل هناك متخصصين وجامعات ومجلس المجلس الفقهي في مكة المكرمة أعتقد يجزم هذا الأمر. الأستاذة عزيزة من ماليزيا، هناك أمور يتحملها المودع وكذلك البنوك تتحمل، ليس فقط المودع. نعم، المودع هو يحب أن تسير أمواله وتسير يعني بعائد إليه وكذلك عائد للبنك، وكلا الطرفين يتحمل المسؤولية. وشكرا لكم وأهلا بكم جميعا.
Thank you. And would you please keep your questions brief so that we can have time for responses.
Well, actually, I'm a businessman, so I am always brief. My name is Ghiyas Naqshbandi. I teach at American University in Washington, D.C., and I am one of the few guys who offered Islamic finance in the D.C. area and probably in the eastern United States. The question is very simple, actually, that unfortunately nobody is paying attention to the need to expand Islamic finance in the United States of America. And one of the issues that is hindering the establishment and the expansion of Islamic finance, aside from Islamophobia, is the question of regulations. So I am just wondering, have you considered some kind of possibilities to not interfere, but to study the regulations in the United States and offer some of the suggestions that will facilitate the establishment and the expansion of Islamic finance in America? And actually, I came to from Washington only to share that view with the audience and with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was another question from that side. No, there is a question over there. Over there, the gentleman. Well, the mic has to go from one place to the other, so somebody has to move. Thank you very much. Okay, he already got one. He already got one. He got the mic. Yes.
أنا بدي أسأل الأخوان بما يتعلق في حسابات الاستثمار. الأخ من البحرين أشار إن حساب الاستثمار لا يعتبر وديعة، وطبعا هذه المعلومة يعني موجودة ومعروفة أن جزء من حسابات الاستثمار تعتبر بمثابة قرض حسن مقدم من العميل إلى البنك، وجزء منه يمثل 10 إلى 20%، ماكسيموم 30% يعتبر وديعة يحصل من خلالها على عوائد سنوية. هذا التعريف ترى تعريف منشور، يعني منشور في حساب في البيانات المالية للبنوك الإسلامية منها الكيفج، والنشر هذا تم من أكثر من 20 أو 5 أو يعني من مدة طويلة، يعني ما أتذكر السنوات، لكن هو منشور من زمان. فموضوع أن هذه الجزئية قد تؤثر على معيار كفاءة رأس المال أو قد تؤثر على التعليمات الرقابية المختصة، أعتقد أنها يعني بعيدة عن المتناول، إلا إذا كان هناك يعني رؤية مختلفة عن الرؤية اللي طرحتها حضرتك. شكرا.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me now turn to the panelists and see who would like to answer the three questions that have been posed. Governor Zetti, would you like to?
Yes. In terms of rating and evaluation of Islamic finance, we all have rating agencies to make that assessment. But if you're referring to rating with respect to Sharia compliance, this is undertaken by the central bank. When we do our supervisory oversight, one of the areas where we make the assessment is the enforcement of compliance. We have a similar to what is in Morocco, a Supreme Council as well of Sharia. We have a national Sharia Council which issues the fatwas. So in terms, and we have a governance framework for compliance to this, and the central bank will make this when we undertake our supervisory oversight into the respective Islamic financial institutions, not just to the banks, but Takaful, and we make that assessment. Now, on the other question relating to legislation, this is very key, and that is why we have an extensive and comprehensive legislation for the Islamic finance sector that covers the entire spectrum of operations in the Islamic finance sector, and it's the Islamic Financial Services Act. And this was modernized and made more comprehensive in 2013. So we have that in place. And this is very key to provide certainty and predictability, which is very important with respect to all the Sharia transactions, financial transactions and contracts that are entered into. And the final question, if I just say, on why Islamic finance hadn't developed extensive or entered into the US financial system. I should say that Europe and even in Japan and Korea, in Asia and China, that haven't got Islamic finance financial system developed in their country, but they are participating very extensively in the Islamic financial systems that are in other parts of the world. Like, for example, in Malaysia, many Japanese corporations have raised sukuk out of our market. And so there's great participation. And now we have seen other non-Muslim countries like Hong Kong and United Kingdom and Luxembourg issuing their own sukuk and developing their financial system. So I should say that in the current environment, there's tremendous potential for Islamic finance because they have seen, the crisis has demonstrated what happens to a financial system when there's a disconnect between the financial system and the economy. We want financial system that serves the real economy. We want a financial system that already has embedded in it checks and balances and elements that support financial stability. And Islamic finance has all these features. And the fact that the crisis has surfaced so many, well, has precipitated the kind of reforms that we just talked about. And that's the whole point, that many of us from emerging economies, we were not part of that global financial crisis. And yet we have to implement the financial reforms that have been put in place in response to the crisis. So Islamic finance is one of the answers, and therefore it's drawn more interest. So I'm optimistic that it will venture into those kind of jurisdictions that have not adopted it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who would like to answer, please?
Yes.
Ahmed.
You know, with regard to the rating agency, I mean, in Bahrain we have an international Islamic rating agency, and it does two types of ratings: the creditworthiness rating and the Sharia compliance rating. But unfortunately, the Sharia compliance rating, they don't disclose it up until now, and for reasons, as you know, if they raise serious issues in compliance, Sharia compliance, then the entity will suffer a lot. So this is an area which is not regulated now, and hopefully as market mature, then these sort of rating reports will be then disclosed. And the central bank, about 2013, called upon all Islamic banks to go and seek rating, so that then we have a developed market in Bahrain. And several of them already now being rated either by the International Islamic Rating Agency or by Moody's and Standard & Poor's and Fitch. There was an issue about the communication gap, and there was a mention of the scholars academies. We have, as you know, in Muslim world, we have two academies, and the members are Sharia scholars, prominent Sharia scholars. But the problem here is that these academies are on different world than the scholars who serve in the Sharia board. So there is gap as well in that area. Not to mention the gap with the industry, with the public at large that we've seen across the countries. There was an issue about the U.S. U.S. market in Bahrain. As a result of September 11, we organized a trip to Washington, And that trip was with a delegation of accountants, scholars, practitioners, regulators, lawyers, all from Bahrain to go to Washington and basically have a dialogue and educate the authorities there about what exactly Islamic finance is. It's not terrorist finance. This is different, totally different model and different perspective. But of course, the decision to go to US is the industry, at the industry discretion. The regulators can facilitate, but the industry will have to pick up this call if there is interest in this. But from our understanding from the industry is that there's complications. The laws in the US is very complicated. The regulatory requirements is very tough. And for example, the issue of de-risking, for example, arise as a result of the tough stance of the regulator in America. With regard to the investment accounts, as you know, the investment accounts are, they are not transacted or dealt with based on Qard Hasan, interest-free loan. The Qard Hasan principle applies only to deposit to the current account, which is a real deposit. So that's the only exception to the definition of deposit. Current account is a deposit, at least in the laws of Bahrain. But the investment accounts are transacted either based on mudaraba or agency arrangements. And unfortunately, the practice has been there for long years, is that these accounts are on balance sheet if they are unrestricted. Unrestricted means there is a discretion given to the management of the bank to invest this in the way they want. But if they are restricted, then it is off balance sheet. But both, whether it's restricted or unrestricted, they should not be commingled with the funds of the bank. And in some jurisdiction, they take it all of it, they take it off balance sheet, especially if it is an agency arrangement. So I was sharing the experience in Bahrain. Maybe in Kuwait or in other jurisdictions different. But that's what I was referring to is the experience, our experience in Bahrain. And also, I would also like to make a reference to the IOFI standards on this, which is also of vital importance in terms of what exactly meant by investment account in this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed.
I think, let me just address two issues. One is the legislative issue, and the other is the slow take-up of Islamic finance in the United States. On the legislative side, I think there's a very interesting, very informative IMF working paper, very recent, which is a survey of the legislative basis for Islamic finance across some 25 jurisdictions. And what's quite interesting is that only about 11 jurisdictions have embedded regulation and supervision of Islamic finance in law. Others use a variety of instruments, central bank directives or decrees. And the paper raises the issue of whether, in fact, it is sufficient to pursue the full-scale introduction of Islamic finance in the absence of a strong legal background. So I think that's a very important point. At the same time, I think what we can point to from the IFSB is that what we are seeing is that a large number of countries are, in fact, not diving into Islamic finance. What they are doing before they introduce Islamic finance, and Morocco is an excellent example of a recent example, is that they are carrying out a comprehensive legal and regulatory review of what the needs are. Of course, there's also a tax review, other policy review. And that is taking up a significant amount of time. But the good thing is that it leads to a strategy.